All right. Hello, everybody. I think we'll get started. It's just about noon here on the West Coast. So good afternoon to everybody and whatever time zone you might be reaching us from. Welcome to the March edition of the Seattle Revit User Group. Slightly different this month, as no doubt you have noticed, because it's our first meeting online. So we'll talk about that in just a second. This is odd since SeaRUG is usually a social event, and we'll see how it goes. So hopefully everybody's doing all right. You're staying quarantined as need be, and continuing to work and stay productive as best as you can. So thank you for bearing with us during this kind of strange time. So I'm going to actually get off here and pass it along to our presenter today as quickly as possible, maybe even quicker than usual, because you don't want to hear me rambling on. But I do want to give a little bit of a SeaRUG update, as we usually do. So today we have Unifi Labs has come back to present again. They did a presentation on content management a couple of years ago that was really great. So we're so happy to have them back and to have Karen Pierce, who's going to give us what hopefully is a great presentation, very informative and of great value to all of you SeaRUG and Revit users out there. I will let Karen introduce herself and get into the agenda a little bit on her own later, which I'm sure she'll do it more justice than I can. And of course, I always want to thank all of our partners. This year's meetings are all booked up. We have sponsors for every meeting, which is absolutely great. They're all from the vendor ecosystem, as you see on the slide. So a big thank you to all of our sponsors. And of course, a big thank you as well to all of our board members, everybody that helps put these meetings together and curate the content and kind of keep the gears turning here. Obviously, we're in a somewhat of a strange time. This is, like I mentioned before, our first time that we've had to do an online meeting, and doing this without any feedback whatsoever is kind of strange for me. But hopefully we don't have to do this very often. I do believe that to think that this situation is going to be over in a month is a little bit too optimistic. So maybe we won't pretend that that's the case. But SeaRUG is largely a social event. So we like our in-person meetings, and we hope that we can get to them as quickly as possible. While we're on the subject of staying home and quarantining, don't forget we put out a call through the email blast a few days ago. Approach Technology, our last sponsor, has graciously agreed to provide some remote access to people that may need it during this time. So please reach out to me directly or look up Approach Technology online to kind of get that going if you need it. And also because of this being an online meeting, we've reached out a little bit farther than our usual network. So if you're coming to us from somewhere other than the SeaRUG ecosystem and the Puget Sound region, if you're interested in these meetings, we always record them for YouTube as well. So we can extend our reach a little bit. Come over to meetup.com and look up SeaRUG, or just meetup.com/SeaRUG. You'll get to see the rest of our calendar of events coming up for the rest of the year. And let me go over to the next one here. We have our branding contest still going on. I've decided to kind of extend the deadline on this because of the kind of strange time that we've got going on. But if you haven't heard about this, basically we're looking for creative content from all of our creative members out there to basically spruce up what you're seeing right now. Our logo, our branding, our PowerPoint templates, that kind of a thing we can use help with. So look it up through this QR code. There's some requirements and some specs that you can download at this link. If I move on from this too quickly, you can always reach out to me through Meetup, and I can get you the information. And without any further ado, I think that I'm right at 5 minutes on the dot. I want to pass it along to Karen Pierce of Unifi and get the real presentation going. So I'll talk to you at the end of this, and stay well if you sign off before that, and let's hear from Unifi.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that, David. And hi there to all you SeaRUG members and beyond. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Laura Higley, and I'm the Marketing Director at Unifi. Again, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. We really appreciate everyone's flexibility and showing up for this month's meetup virtually. And I also want to give a huge thank you to David and the entire SeaRUG organization for all their hard work in making this presentation possible for us. We are thrilled to have Unifi's BIM specialist, Karen Pierce, who has over 10 years of experience in the AEC industry, lead today's presentation. Before I hand the floor to Karen to get started, I want to note that although we are in a virtual format today, we won't let that keep us from having an open and interactive discussion throughout the presentation. Please don't be shy. At Unifi, we strive to journey with our customers to provide the best-in-class, better BIM solutions. Part of the reason we're able to accomplish that is because we're always open and looking for feedback and ideas from bright minds in the industry. With that being said, you'll be prompted to utilize the chat feature at the bottom of your Zoom window to ask or answer questions and make comments as they come to mind throughout today's presentation. Again, we take what you have to say very seriously, and we'll use it to continually improve our offerings to the industry. So we really appreciate you participating today. And on that note, there's no better time than now to get used to using that chat feature. And it looks like we have some people saying hi. So hi, Jen from Via Technic. That's one of our partners. Great to have you today. Looks like we have Jay Merlon dialing in, one of my all-time favorite people. Hi, Jay. Bradley Cooley with O'Brien and Co. Nice to have you here from Portland. Another person from Portland in the house. Great. So it looks like you guys are all ready to go utilizing that chat feature. And again, I really appreciate you being so agile and adapting to this virtual format. Should be a great discussion today. So without further ado, let me hand things over to Karen to get the presentation started. Karen, take it away.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Laura, as well as David. This is definitely unusual. I was very much looking forward to visiting Seattle. I think I just blew by it when I took a cruise last summer. So it would have been nice to get some FaceTime over there, but things are what they are for sure. So with today's agenda, what we're really going to be discussing, actually before I get into the agenda, let me not forget to introduce myself. My name is Karen Pierce. I'm a BIM specialist at Unifi. I have 10 years of experience within the AEC industry. I started off being very much a paper pusher, being a document controller, really just making sure the printer doesn't run out. But became a designer very shortly after that and got into BIM management and process improvements. And I'm really all about being about as fast as you can. So I've developed a lot of tricks over the years, and I'll be sharing some of those today. So what we're going to cover today in particular is just, of course, going over a general Unifi introduction. Since we visited Seattle some 3 years ago, we've really changed a lot. We've really changed not just our program and our searching abilities within the cloud, but we also have started really focusing on analytic data in addition to the customer process. We're going to be talking about managing your content, though, in general. Of course, since we're sponsoring this event, we will showcase a few tips and tricks on our side, but I'll also be walking through some of the other well-known features that people use. And of course, we're going to talk about mistakes to avoid with that. We're also going to talk about if you don't have anything in place right now, we'll talk about some benefits you can get and really what the process might look like on choosing the right platform for you. Of course, we're going to want to understand cloud security. Unifi is a cloud-based platform, so we definitely take security very seriously. And of course, you'll also never be able to implement a content management platform if you don't have one already, if we don't discuss how you can go about understanding ROI so you can get upper management to sign on the dotted line. So with that, enough about me. We sent out a survey just yesterday and we got a few responses. But I'm curious, what type of people do we have on the phone? Who in the audience is an architect? Just by a show of hands, or you can say me in the chat if you're more comfortable with that. Awesome, Anna, glad to hear it. So then who's an engineer? Looks like everybody else might either be a little shy on the chat or maybe they're more of the BIM technologists or managers overseeing Unifi or other content platforms. So acting as support, maybe general contractors. Thank you, Bradley. Acting as support to those architects and engineers or to a completely different persona in general. So we got BIM tech. They're raising their hands. Okay, awesome. Thank you, guys. Awesome. All right. So the next thing I want to ask is, how many of you guys have heard about Unifi? Everybody, just about. Or at least we got 12 people, 13 people, it looks like. All right. So for those of you who don't know, we are a content management solution. We do deal heavily within the Revit environment, but we have add-ins for AutoCAD and MicroStation as well. So you'll be seeing many of our primary features today, and we'll go from there. So from there, though, out of you guys who have heard about Unifi, who's using Unifi today? Looks like we have about 10 of you. So awesome. If you guys are ever finding you're having any difficulties with using Unifi, I would really like you to reach out to support@unifilabs.com. We have a fantastic customer success team. I'm part of that team. I know I've probably spoken to a couple of you. Some of your names are familiar. But if you're struggling in any way, by all means, don't ever hesitate to reach out. We definitely pride ourselves on our customer experience. So of course, there's always a few of you here. So who's just here today because it's your favorite sporting event maybe got canceled and this is possibly the next best thing? Okay, a few of you, cool. Now, a little bit about Unifi. So of course, we gave a bit of an introduction a few years ago, but we really were actually founded by a different company, JDA. So JDA engineers had a problem with content, and it's that really it didn't really exist. It was lacking with a lot of our manufacturers, so that's how we got our start. Because those engineers were spending a fortune to build it, and also once that content was built, they were finding it very difficult to be able to manage their content effectively, whether it was accessing it or just finding it, or maybe even the version control and the workflow required to update content. So once they figured out also that a cloud solution was particularly what they wanted to have, because it's really a very flexible platform, especially in regards to supporting multiple offices. It really acts as a single source of truth as well. So those virtual assets all go to the cloud. You're not maintaining content in two different platforms by any means. And we do use AWS, by the way, over at Unifi. So with Unifi's content and how it's been built, we're really focusing on workflow, as I've mentioned. We're journeying with our customers, and we're helping them with really being able to get the value from technology. As we've progressed over the last year, year and a half especially as well, more and more of our focus has been on the data side. So I'll talk a little bit probably about our insights and an analytical platform, and we also have an API. So we're opening up that workflow to non-modelers as well and multi-formats. So we're really all about the data consistency as well as the granularity that the whole workflow entails. So what you'll see today is we offer, you can see sort of our timeline here. We've got a great deal of work we've been really focusing on, especially over the last couple of years. So since we just last talked back in 2017, we're now supporting any file format. Some people I've come across recently seem to still think we're only Revit-based. That is not the case. The only real restrictions we might have as far as housing content are executable files, and it's simply because of security concerns. Just back in 2018, we released Project Analytics, which what I like to call is the triage for your projects. Quickly setting up things like Revit filters to really determine which warnings are important or not to your system, as well as being able to see things like imports, which minor versions of Revit people are syncing according to, as well as just what sync times are looking like and who's syncing as often as they should. it really just provides a level of triage that really helps you just focus on what's important instead of getting bogged down monitoring every single file. So with this year, well, not this year, considering we're only in March, but last year we introduced the API for content management, as well as beginning to initialize the beta version of what we're going to be calling Unifi Visualize or Connect. We're still working on that name, but it's really going to enable, instead of it being all user-based, it'll get hands into perhaps your project managers who may or may not be Revit savvy. So very simple web interface. By all means, feel free to reach out to us if we are in need of a demo to showcase some of that. So Unifi today, we have over 11,500 users. We've created, as part of our services, over 13.3 million families amongst everybody. So we have 300 companies underneath our umbrella as well, managing 16.3 million pieces of content. And that totals to be just about 25 terabytes of data. And also just because of the way our platform is built, the way we do try to make it as seamless for the customer as possible to learn, in addition to our customer success program, our retention rate is hitting about 98%. So our BIM Data Platform, really what we're all about is we're trying to focus on data and how it ties to our vision and our purpose of fluid data collaboration for all our stakeholders. We're helping organizations get structure to their data, control their data, and enforce schema, ultimately as long as they're sharing external ecosystems that are structured. This ability to share data in a manner where recipients can readily consume it is really making a minimal processing environment. With insights and the API, they're really driving us more into the data direction. And we're also going to try to be getting into things like content analytics very soon. So by surfacing this data in a way that a non-modeler can also engage with it, we're being able to pull everybody into the workflow. So a little bit about the building blocks here at Unifi. We're all about the content. That is our ultimate start. But with this content, we're looking at the data, the geometry, and the version. So all about the consistency and the visualization that I've mentioned. But of course, all that content has to live somewhere. So we have content libraries. With that comes things like permissions, usage ability, as well as what content lives in which libraries. Of course, content also lives in models. So as we continue to go up this stack, we are building upon it. So with models, we're able to, of course, manage the content and the versions. With our project analytics platform, we can also tell which model, which piece of content is within the model and whether that matches the current Unifi version. So that's super exciting, and a lot of our customers love that. We can tell who loaded what content, when they loaded it, and get additional insights into the particular model health. So that's the warnings I was talking about. Next is, of course, the project itself. Multiple models can make up a single project. You have architecture, mechanical, structural, all the trades that go in there. So with all of that, we're just continuously building upon each other to really realize a certain team efficiency. Of course, projects, multiple projects make up your regular firm project portfolio, where you can determine what your workload is, how efficient you are overall as a firm, that project's health, and then the client-facing insights that we're ultimately getting into. So that's really what makes us all up, and that's really what we're going to as far as journeying with our customers, not just with content, but the entire life cycle within the firm in regards to content, libraries, models, projects, and ultimately the firm. So now let's get into the real meat and potatoes of this presentation. Approaches to manage your content, and of course, mistakes that you're going to want to avoid. So what I'd like to hear from you guys, and feel free to just throw it all in the chat, I'll read as fast as I can, but how do you currently manage your content? Are you using a file explorer system? I know some of you are using Unifi, or are we using any other content management platforms? Hannah, what are you using? You say other. Are you able to mention? It's okay if you use a competitor. That's okay. All right, Avail. That's okay. I don't take any hard feelings to that. I'm guessing it's probably because you really like something being locally hosted versus cloud-based. Is that correct? Absolutely understand. And I hope to actually approach a few of those topics today with some of the benefits you get being cloud-based versus locally hosted, and how we can help mitigate some of that fear you might have with being away on the cloud. That's an awesome application, Robert. So templates being lean and content in Unifi, that's exactly my suggestions with our current customers. So I'd also be curious across the board here, what's the biggest struggle you guys are currently having with your content? Is it that you can't manage to keep it updated? Is it that you don't have time to update it? Is it just trying to find it? Locating it. Anna, locating it and you're using Avail? Avail's supposed to be helping you with that. Breaking habit of taking from old projects. Mark, let's definitely talk about that. Feel free to reach out to us. Unifi, I'm not going to be talking about it too much today, but we offer something where you can actually grab content from project to project. But with Unifi, we could also be able to batch export content from projects, tag it with the project it came from, and then you're still having that mindset, but now you're able to incorporate some more healthier habits. And a mix of parameters coming from our stuff versus manufacturer. Christopher, that is a very big issue with our content analytics that we're hoping to push out this year. We've already started the first step of that by being able to actually manage shared parameters directly within the Unifi web portal. And with that, we're going to be able to get into things like parameter mapping to help you with exactly where you're struggling with, Christopher. Now, the last question I have for everybody, at least for the time being, what's your Revit template currently like? Robert, you mentioned that your templates are lean and content's in Unifi, so that's beautiful. But what else am I seeing here? So you're, Robert, please reach out to support@unifilabs.com. You could also reach out to myself, Karen.Pierce@unifilabs.com, and I'll make sure you get that training you're wanting as you're already a Unifi customer, and we'll purposely actually dedicate that time to requesting updates as well as new content. All right, all. So with that, let's actually talk about some approaches now. So I've heard a little bit about what you guys are currently doing, so let's discuss some things. The first, and this is always usually the most important, is naming conventions. So with naming conventions, there's generally a process, and it might look something along these lines, where you have a major determiner. So with a major descriptor, this is where we're talking about maybe it's a mechanical, maybe it belongs in electrical, maybe it belongs in plumbing. And gradually, as you go through the naming convention, you then start to focus on micro. So what is it? Is it a door? Is it a window? Is it a chair? And then add some modifiers. So some great modifiers might be in particular to how it's hosted, or maybe something else like whether it's a wood fixture or ceiling, or perhaps even a GFCI information piece. So even if you're using Unifi, having standard naming conventions is actually super important to some people because they want to spot rogue families within the project browser. So within the project browser, if they're not following the standard convention, it becomes very easy to sort of pick out. And as I've walked our customers through implementing Unifi, we've also noticed that families often aren't even always categorized correctly. So that brings us to our second point. Content should always be properly categorized. If you have an entire library full of casework and you notice a certain family of casework actually is a piece of furniture or maybe a generic model, you're going to have issues with the way your content appears in your model. If you're trying to hide your casework, there might be a new family that actually ends up showing up that shouldn't supposed to. So with that, actually, we can talk about a vetting process. We've worked with our customers on a variety of different types of applications here, whether that's something like a dedicated development library, or whether it's more simple where it's just you have a certain set of library admins or company admins that go through content, and they then just have the power to either approve it or reject it from the rest of their users. With that, we can discuss things like permissions. Oftentimes, I've found that our IT department, especially when I was as a BIM manager for an architecture firm in the past, they just gave free access to the content library. They were able to not only read from it and download content, but they could write to it as well. So I had families updating that shouldn't supposed to be. I had my shared perimeter file changing when it shouldn't. So it really ended up causing almost more of a headache having this free-for-all system in my file explorer than was ultimately worth it to me. So we actually, I implemented Unifi at a prior firm, went through the whole process that I'll discuss with you today, as far as vetting it went, as far as proving the ROI to my manager. And it really came down to things of what were we doing, what we needed to do, and the steps we needed to get there. So once you realize, hey, I've got my naming convention sorted, got my content, I've got my vetting process, my permissions all squared away, it's also about trying to make content as simple as possible for the end user. A few of you guys were able to answer the survey ahead of today's call, and I thank you for that. One of the things that actually brought my attention forward was that a lot of you guys are still struggling, no matter what content platform you're using, to find content. So I'd really like to invite you guys to try to figure out a way to create a folder with some commonly referenced content that might mirror something you have in existence. At Unifi, we have something called Save Searches, where it's literally a matter of 3 clicks. And it will constantly update as well as when your content updates. So super straightforward. We also have the ability to do things like favorites. It's a simple matter of simply right-clicking, and users can then filter by those favorites or set up a particular saved search. So choosing the right platform for you. This is a bit of a redundant question, so I might go ahead and gloss over it because I know I've heard from an Avail user already. I'm curious though, do we have any Hive customers or any customers who are using Content Studio? Well, not customers, but people on the phone. Sorry, used to talking to customers. So no Hive customers or Content Studio customers. All right. Who's still using a file explorer? I think I've seen that once throughout this chat, but I'm curious who else might be on the line. Brick and Christopher. All right. Thank you guys for raising your hands. Thanks for that, Robert. Let's definitely touch base on your results that you're seeing. So the next question I have, and I'm going to ask this in 2 phases, but which of you guys value permissions over ease of use with your content management platform? Rick and Darren, anybody else? Darren, not anymore? That's okay, you could have already lowered your hand. So who values ease of use? Ease of use for you, Bradley? All right. And then anybody else like ease of use, like Chris? Thank you. All right. Now, if you could use anything, guys, what would you like it to be? Do you want it to be locally hosted or cloud hosted? And if possible, I especially be interested from the Avail customer we have here, why or why not? Robert, yep, cloud to be available anywhere. Now you could certainly fight with a VPN, but if internet speeds are already being throttled since everyone's working from home, why would you want to add to it, right? BIM 360 is awesome. I don't like giving more of my hard money to Autodesk, but I guess there it is. What about your local people? Rick, keep that thought in mind between your local cloud hybrid. I've got some interesting statistics to share when we start talking about security. All right, guys, we'll go ahead and move on then. So choosing the right platform for you. Again, this is a bit where I'm going to go ahead and pitch Unifi a bit. With the Unifi application, we really keep searching as simple as it can be. So you can see here that I've typed in exhaust. I can also search by particular Revit parameters that might be embedded within my content. So I could see the exhaust units that are dedicated to being 120 volt as far as my voltage parameter goes. We also have a full, I mentioned this to you guys earlier, a full approval and rejection process with our notifications tab. So anyone who's not an administrator of the library, and it's super, again, easy to set up, it has to be either approved or rejected. When you go to see if it can be approved, you're able to open the family up. You can view the parameter data, the type data, see the Revit version. That's basically everything you'll need at a glance to be able to tell whether you can approve or reject that content. What we've also got with Unifi is actually a built-in content request platform. So instead of somebody dropping by and trying to send out an email to you or giving you the nice friendly post-it or phone call, they can just submit a form. And this form is actually identical whether it's trying to request an update to existing content or new content. We really make it about as straightforward as possible. And from there, we can also attach all of the design documentation. So not only is all my information in one spot, but it's also got full transparency. For this whirlpool spa example, if this whirlpool spa is sitting in my architect library as well as my electrical library, maybe I'm having to handle multiple disciplines here, I can very easily have all of my users see it. So I'm not going to be getting requests for the same piece of content if they can just see what might be already underway. By having all my design documentation there and being able to download it all at one spot, it's just very handy. I don't have to maybe go on the internet, find more information. And I can also put more responsibility in the hands of my requester, because with the discussion board, if I'm missing something like a specific model number, I can very easily email through this discussion board and have a direct lane of communication here. So having this streamlined process really makes you more efficient. And once, of course, it's all been submitted, it automatically gets added to the libraries. And we can also set up, by the way, a development library. So if you don't want it to go automatically be approved, we can work with you to set up yet another filter for QA and QC purposes. So this is always a very commonly referenced issue, right? As just having everything still in the File Explorer. So with the File Explorer, you're really going to be restricted only searching by name. You're not going to have the ability to access any metadata, whether that's going to be something like a content rating or a favorite or metadata of tagging. So whether you want to add tags like the CSI number or the keynote, maybe even just the type of project you're working on. Is it more geared towards healthcare or commercial, for example? And I know we also have a ton of GitHub customers on the phone too. I love GitHub, don't get me wrong. I like it as far as the collaboration process goes. I'm able to see who syncs, who's being able to pull information. It's got a full version control here, but there's some disadvantages. If you're not tech savvy, you're going to have difficulties. I have always considered myself a bit tech savvy, but I had issues at first too. Being able to figure out how I could actually be able to pull and download locally versus just logging into the GitHub site. I didn't get training on it, so maybe that's, of course, what kind of drew me to having this negative first impression on it. But Unifi kind of works past that. Also, it's even not necessarily being Unifi, having a good team, being able to train you for whatever you guys have is going to be critical to your applications. So let's talk about the cloud, especially for those that might not like the cloud. One of the things I'm curious about is why we're even still talking about this. Most everything we have already lives in the cloud. I can't remember the last time I wrote a check, for example. So I'm doing online banking. I'm doing online transfer, and even with banking with Zelly. My email, of course, has always been around, and social media is here. And of course, all of us here are remote as well. We're all logging into our cloud and being able to actually stream this webinar for you guys. And what we're going to talk about while we discuss the cloud today is we're going to discuss things like the data breaches. So how many data breaches actually occur with local servers? How many exist with cloud servers? And then talking about this hybrid system, like one of you guys did earlier, we're going to talk about that too. And you'll be actually kind of surprised by some of the results that have been given. The mobility of today's workforce too, and the cloud is really what's enabling us to be so mobile. It's what's it's really what's helping us not be completely shut down. Of course, the bars and restaurants and many different places have shut down, and we're not having the freedom we used to experience, but we're still able to function because of this internet ability that we have right now. Some of the benefits we actually have to offer in the cloud we're going to discuss. That's some things like automatic upgrading, and it really helps you out with that multiple offices too. And believe it or not, backups. So, of course, I can't talk about cloud security without talking about government projects. The US is still very limited in its adoption of cloud security because of this requirement. So Autodesk simply also doesn't really allow it with the BIM 360, or rather the government doesn't allow it with Autodesk and BIM 360. And I'll admit too, I was actually a bit concerned when my boyfriend referenced a bit of my search history one day. It's not that we share emails or accounts, but we share a Wi-Fi connection. So that was a bit enlightening as far as how accessible some of our data can be. But many assume that the cloud makes compliance standards more difficult, but in reality, the reverse is actually true. Cloud providers, especially when you go through the encryption methods they provide, have a lot of complex tools in place, so it's actually easier to keep data in check. And another important thing to note is that business leaders who assume their organization can't use the cloud likely don't realize that they're also already deeply immersed for other aspects of their business. For example, what would happen if you asked the questions with your organizations that might be against the cloud, what they use for their HR management? What about your Office 365 applications? Outlook, Access, Excel, Word, those are all in the cloud. So the ultimate problem for organizations is really that they just don't understand that the cloud is a shared responsibility model. And governments are actually starting to shift. The UK is a prime example of that. So cloud security in general. So this nice little graph actually comes from the 2017 Cloud Security Report. I think there might be an updated one out there. But if you look at the public cloud, the number of incidences that are occurring on an average per customer is only 405. And a lot of those are really based because of the end user issues. They're not changing their passwords. They're using something that's super easy to guess. When it's locally hosted, that number goes up to 612. And look at your hybrid model, by the way. The hybrid model is 977. So by far, it's got more issues of clouds of being secure than anything else does. Over twice what the public cloud is. So don't be afraid of AWS, Google. Just make sure you have those encryption methods in place. And many companies are actually already using things like cloud storage already. The Office, Microsoft Office 365, gives you a free SharePoint access, for example. But a lot of our public cloud providers have by far invested more than any hosted private cloud or on-premise server could possibly be capable of, because they've got the most up-to-date technologies, operations, data centers, and threat intelligence to really increase this cloud security. And also, a couple of things that I just like to kind of debunk as well is that it's not the malware, it's not that malware is not a problem. I absolutely know that it is, but having those anti-malware protections go both ways. You have to really understand that you're able to actually have, hey, let's make sure my passwords are up to date. Let's make sure that if I have my hardware security on my password and all those updates are underway, it's really just as much the responsibility of the public cloud providers to provide security as it is your own self. So hopefully we've worked a little past the cloud. I'd really like to talk to you guys now about what you can get out of the benefits of the cloud. So versioning. Now, when I was a former BIM manager, even a designer, because it probably wasn't even on my radar, whenever I had to update a family, I simply updated it. I saw that little .001, .002 backup family that was created, and I would just delete them whenever the time came. It was simply too much to keep track of, and I was busy enough. Being hosted in the cloud, Unifi really has this ability that's as simple as right-clicking to go back to a previous version. Also, being locally hosted, you're going to have to upgrade your entire Revit library, including, of course, container projects full of schedules, drafting views, system families, with every single update of Revit. Getting all of that into Unifi, or maybe other cloud-based platform, try not to be too picky here, but we're going to automatically upgrade it for you. So then you'll only manage one file. Maybe that's a base file of 18. So now you're not having to update 3 different families or 4 different families just to get to the next version year. We're also much more seamless with things like multiple offices being cloud-based. It's simply a matter of being on the internet. A lot of you guys know that already. I'm just hoping some of you guys also see it within your own self, guys. I'm sure a lot of you guys are hooking into VPNs. VPNs will throttle on you too, just like your ISP providers are doing. We're all home, our kids are home. We're all suffering from a little bit of a slower speed than we're used to. Cloud will help mitigate some of that. And we also provide backups. We provide backups even probably more often than your own servers do. We really want to make sure that you guys will always have access to your content, no matter what happens. So let's talk about ROI now. So with your current system, by a show of hands, Brick, can you put your hand down? Is it possible? So, sorry. All right, so by a show of hands, awesome, thanks, Brick. How long does it take you to find the content you're looking for? Under a minute. Chris, Hammond, awesome, a lot of you guys, so 6 so far. Now, or 4, or 6, let's go with 6. So B, guys, so go ahead and clear those answers out. Who does it take 1 to 3 minutes? 6. Looks like we got another 6 people. And who, 7, looks like perhaps. So who takes more than 3 minutes? All right, guys, so only had 15 answer total out of 32, but that's okay. If you guys are taking a long time to find your content, there's going to be an issue. Everybody who's under a minute, awesome. You could probably get it even a little faster, but under a minute, who wants to count down to 30 seconds or 15? But those who are in B and C, we're going to talk about a little bit about that. Now, with a quick note in the chat, how do you guys go about updating your content? Is it sort of like the process I described earlier with somebody stops by your desk or sends you an email? Or do you use Unifi, or do you use something different? A mix of email, chat, and Unifi. Thanks, Robert. Unifi and Smartsheet. Jennifer, I'd be curious, why do you find you need to use Smartsheet and Unifi? What does Smartsheet give you that Unifi can't? Update and save to new folder, internal automation. All right. Tracking hundreds of changes at once. Yeah, that can be very difficult. So if your system had to change tomorrow, if you guys found out exactly where you struggled and you found out what you needed to change, how flexible is your system to that change? Somewhat, a little, a lot, like very flexible, not flexible at all, is it brittle like glass? Somewhat. All right. So we took a survey, actually. I think this was back in January of 2019 to nearly 100 of our clients. We found that on average, our customers were looking for content about 13 times a week. That they gave us additional numbers on how long it took them to find that content. Sometimes it took them as many as 10 minutes because it wasn't just, they could find a piece of content, but maybe didn't have the right type name, so they had to fix it. Or maybe it was missing another piece of critical data, or they just opened it up and found out it wasn't good enough. So ultimately, we ended up finding out from this survey that over 3.5 hours a designer a week was wasted. That really equated to over 200 hours a year. So we found out what Unifi can reduce time for, and we really were able to actually even understand the ROI by asking ourselves those questions. You know, how often are users finding content? How long does it take them to find content? And then it's not just content I want you guys to think about, like RFAs or PDFs, but content is schedules. Content is drafting views. Those can be very difficult if you guys are using container projects to store them. Unifi can really store those types of content. We can also store things like materials, build patterns, even sheets. And we can actually track changes with those types of content too. So it doesn't have to all live in a container file anymore and just be arbitrarily updated. We can really get very granular with tracking. So the Unifi why. We started this company here, and I even took this job here to help move the industry forward. So we're able to design and build it better now. And we're really advancing our capabilities so we can enable a better future as well as an optimized process for designing, building, and operating these phases. So our vision is also to help facilitate the life cycle of our common data environments. So we're going to have the ability to help by providing the ability to structure data for content. It's not just about RFAs, it's about the parameters within them. It's about ensuring the right parameters are within your content and being able to track all of that. So we're enabling a really fluid collaboration rather than this legacy practice of recreating or reformatting just so every stakeholder can make it useful for them. We really want to enable our users, and that's really what gives us our purpose, to empower our stakeholders through this fluid data collaboration. So that can be readily consumed. If we're using the data provided, we don't have to recreate it, so that very easily I can take my engineer's drawing, push it into my contractor's environment, take it into the GC world, and being able to go from there. Sorry guys, used the wrong button there. And it looks like these are some repeats of the slides, so sorry guys, and forgot about that. So thank you. I'm going to actually turn it back to Laura so she can handle any questions, and I'll be happy to answer them.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Karen. So before we hand the floor over to David to wrap things up, I just want to thank our SeaRUG members for joining that presentation. Does anyone have any additional questions that Karen can answer while we have her on the line? If so, if you go ahead and put them in the chat, we'd love to answer those in the next few minutes here. Alrighty then. Let me just go ahead and thank you one more time, the SeaRUG members and David and the whole organization for having us today. It was a true honor and pleasure to speak to your group and hear your firsthand experiences. We really appreciate the comments and participation throughout today's presentation. I do want to quickly mention, since there wasn't lunch like you're used to today at your monthly SeaRUG meetups, we will be sending everyone a gift card to Starbucks. So please be on the lookout for that to enjoy when things start opening up. And of course, if you're interested in learning more about Unifi, please don't hesitate to reach out at sales@unifilabs.com or find us on the web at unifilabs.com. Please stay safe and healthy, and I'll now hand the floor back to David to wrap things up.
All right, thank you very much. And thank you, Unifi, for that. Let me go ahead and I think I'll need Karen to stop sharing her screen just to bring back, yep, here we go. Bring back my SeaRUG slides over here just to wrap it up. Thank you again, Unifi. Thank you for the Starbucks cards, in lieu of the lunch that we usually do. It is what it is. Strange times. If I could just kind of to wrap up, I'm a huge fan of cloud solutions for very obvious reasons, but anytime that the conversation about cloud versus locally hosted comes up, I always sort of wrap things up neatly with the question is your organization spending more on cybersecurity than Amazon? And if the answer to that question is no, you are actually more secure being on their public cloud. But that's just, I'll just leave it there where it comes to cloud solutions. Again, very much thank you to Unifi. Our next meeting is April 15th. DopCon Solutions is going to have, right now it seems like we might be landing on shared coordinates and that sort of topic, which should be pretty interesting. Really hoping we can do this in person, but let's face it, I think that a month is a little bit optimistic to think that this whole thing is going to have blown over. I actually think it's going to take a lot longer. So hopefully this online forum has worked well for you. It takes a little bit less time. You can access it from wherever you are. There's definitely some benefits to it, right? But we like SeaRUG being a social event. So hopefully we'll get to see you in person soon. Thank you very much for joining us. Stay healthy, stay safe, and we will talk to you again in April. And bye-bye, everybody.